Hello, everybody, church. As always, it's great to be with you. I'm really excited about tonight's conversation starter. I'm actually getting to have a conversation with another human being instead of just myself. And one of the guiding principles of Everybody Church is we deeply believe in cross-pollinating with other organizations, other ministries, other nonprofits, other people who are doing the work or complementary work to what we're trying to do at Everybody Church. One of the things that I found working within the progressive Christian movement for the last 20 years is, like most movements in their nascent stages, they result from a lot of fervor, a lot of ardor. They result from people being moved by spirit. And often this happens unbeknownst to others who are experiencing the same thing from the divine. And most reform movements come because a consciousness is bubbling up. As Jesus said, I have many things to tell you, but you can't bear them now. And it seems like in human history, human consciousness grows in such a way that often people on opposite sides of the globe are developing the conscious capacity, the quotient, the spiritual quotient to experience and hear things that we believe the divine voice is speaking to us as human beings. And when that happens, we build all of these ministries, and we kind of are like the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament. We think we're the only ones. And then little, by some mad grace, we begin to find one another. And so in the last year, I have come in contact with a wonderful man named June Love Young. I've met him here in Seattle, where I live half of the time. June's a wonderful Christian man, but he started an organization called Beloved Arise. And so I want to introduce you to this incredible organization, Beloved Arise, because I think it's doing something really special. And I think it's doing something honestly very unique, something that is so desperately needed, something that at Everybody Church and in the world of pastoral care that I do on social media, I really lamented a lack of this particular part of our ministry, and that is direct contact with kids. We do a lot of work, free mom hugs, mama bears, my ministry on social media. We do a lot of work with the parents and indirectly with the kids. Friends of mine like Kathy Baldock, Matthew Vines, indirectly are changing the lives of kids, but most directly are working with professionals, ministers and churches and leadership. But it's been a struggle, honestly, to figure out what to do for the kids themselves. And Beloved Arise is a ministry that has recently started. It's already doing incredible work that is scratching that itch. More than scratching that itch, it's meeting this need. And I just wanted to introduce you guys, first of all, to June's story, because that's another guiding principle at Everybody Church. We love hearing the stories of people. We are an incarnational people. While we're inclusive of all faiths, most of us come from a Christian background, and that is still the religious narrative that is a primary language for us. And as Christian people, we believe deeply in the idea of incarnation, that when God wants to speak, when God wanted to speak, God speaks through the medium of human beings. And the ultimate incarnation, of course, was the person of Jesus. To hear Jesus tell it, the ultimate incarnation is what we're doing now. You remember he said, greater works than these shall you do because I go unto the Father. And the reason he went unto the Father is so that all of us would be filled with that same Spirit, and we would become the body of Christ. And no longer would the body of Christ we just be one bronze-skinned Galilean on the shores of Judea, but everywhere a person filled with the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, enfleshes and manifests God. And Richard Rohr is even expanding our vision beyond this, reminding us that in Matthew 25, Jesus said, as much as you've done unto the least of these, any human being, especially the marginalized, you have met and are in the presence of the person of Jesus, the person of God. And so to that end, I want to introduce you to a fabulous ministry, Beloved Arise, and a new dear friend of mine, June Love Young. First of all, I want June to introduce himself in terms of just a bit of biography, where he comes from and religious background, and a little bit of his own story. June, welcome to Everybody Church.
Oh, thank you, Stan, for that warm welcome. It's so good to sit across the table here with you in your beautiful patio. This is amazing. And I want to say to everybody, church, Greetings to you, wherever you're sitting out there. I just want to extend the grace and peace of Jesus Christ to you. My name is June, and I am a Christian gay man. I reside here in Seattle with my kids. I have two teenage daughters. I'm also a business owner. I run a marketing agency here in Seattle that works with high tech organizations. And as Stan mentioned, I recently founded a nonprofit organization called Beloved Arise that works with LGBTQ youth. I was born in the Philippines, and so that's my origin story. In the Philippines, I grew up in the Catholic Church, went through First Communion, confirmation. But then in the United States, when my parents, my family, and I immigrated here, became part more of a Protestant faith community. But all my life, I've been a Christian, and yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
June, you've had quite a run the last few years. Your life got turned upside down after 20 years of marriage. You, as many of us, experienced the heartbreak and difficulty of a divorce. I also wonder, as a married man, a father of two children in an evangelical world, your own sexuality has been a huge piece of this story. Would you mind, if it's not too much, I'll let you go as far as you want to go with all of that. I know a lot of this is just very personal, especially things like the divorce and the family. Having gone through that myself, I'm always mindful of that there are more people involved in this story than myself. So to whatever extent you're comfortable, could you just share a bit of your journey with your own sexuality, marriage, kids, all of that with everybody church?
Yeah, I I discovered when I was about, I don't know, like 11 or 12, that I really found other guys attractive. I just was curious about other guys. I found them more attractive than girls. But the concept of being gay was just not really anything that I thought was possible in my life. From a young age, I grew up in an environment that taught me that being gay was against God's will, and that gay people grieved the heart of God, and that there was sort of a sacrifice to be made by someone who is gay. Like they would have to choose between kind of repenting. They'd have to repent, from being gay, from the sexual brokenness, and if not, then they'd have to let go of their faith, because those two things were just could not coexist. Uh, so yes, I was conscious about my attraction to other guys when I was younger, but the idea of being gay just really was impossible. Like I perceived it as being impossible. And so in as much as a person chooses to be gay, I chose to be straight. My whole life, for 40 years, I was straight. I got married, I had kids, but sadly, about 3 years ago, that marriage fell apart. And after I was divorced, I did some thinking and reflecting, and saw this as an opportunity to step back and really think through what it means to live life moving forward, and actually considered that I might marry another woman moving forward, because at that point I still thought that being gay was not God's will. And but through a lot of studying and courage, I came out 2 years ago as a Christian gay man. Yeah, I'd be lying if I told you that's smooth and easy. No, it's been a rough go at it. I think every kid who, every family who suffers through divorce experiences pain. Not there isn't a person in that family system that gets kind of spared from pain. But when I came out to my kids, to me, when I say I came out, it, that day, it was actually a Father's Day a couple of years ago. I came out to my kids, and coming out to my kids meant coming out to me. And when I came out to them, they embraced me with love and acceptance and celebration. And I was just, that gave me so much life, so much energy to then tell my story to the rest of the world, right? because if my kids were okay, then I knew everything else would be okay.
So June, one of the things that I found really encouraging is how quickly that you've got this ministry up and running. Ministries like this often, again, they're driven by fervor and ardor and conviction, but generally reform movements aren't flush with resources like money and, people of like heart. But in a relatively short time, you guys are on the ground actually doing ministry. You and I were talking about the Monday nights that you've got going right now. Could you talk practically about the hiring of Scott, who Scott is, actually your board, how developed this ministry is, and practically already, I was looking at the book again, some of the material that you guys have created. It's so well done, not just from a technical standpoint, but the message involved. So practically, what are you guys doing at Beloved Arise? What are some of the services you provide that people at Everybody Church can connect to?
Yeah, so Stan mentioned Scott Gronholz. Scott Gronholz, who I hope you'll get to meet at some point on at Everybody Church, is our first staff member. So he's our youth pastor. We call him our digital youth pastor. And so his job is to reach out to young people across the internet. And he also manages this and facilitates this time that we have, this youth community that we have on Monday evenings. Through lots of talking and kind of dreaming up, we decided to partner, and he is now again our staff member, our one staff member, and his we have an army of volunteers who do the rest of the work, from social media to the publications, the writing, the books that we have, that we've published, to our web presence. If you visit us on belovedarise.org, you'll see more about that. Practically speaking, our work has three parts to it. So the first is youth programming. So as Stan mentioned, we are incarnate. We work directly with young people, whether that's through spiritual development and community building or leadership development. We're also going to be expanding our services to include mental health support. And so we're going to continue to develop world-class youth programming to empower young people, to celebrate and empower young people. The second aspect of our work is advocacy. And I think this is where I think Everybody Church could really participate in. So we advocate for the safety of youth in churches, in faith communities, in Christian schools. We don't wait for churches to change their minds on LGBTQ inclusion. Regardless of where you stand as a church, we want to engage with you in a conversation about what you're doing to keep kids safe. Because the reality is, regardless of your stands on inclusion, there are gay kids that go to your church and who are listening quietly to what's being preached. And these gay kids, many of them, develop internalized homophobia and really dangerous, sort of unhealthy mental health because of the oppression that they feel. And they might not vocalize this, but that's what's happening. 1.8 million LGBTQ teens seriously consider suicide every year. And also, LGBTQ teens have disproportionately higher rates of depression and self-hate and self-harm and being kicked out of their homes. So homelessness is also an issue. So we can no longer accept churches sort of ignoring the fact that you have gay kids in your churches. So we are an advocacy group that helps to advocate for the safety of and well-being of young people in churches. And third aspect of our work is we are a creative publishing house. And so Stan mentioned some of the publications that we have, which you can all see on belovedarise.org. We have Bible studies. We have a guide to affirming theology designed for young people, for queer youth. We're also, we create other things besides book. We're looking into, we have plans to create music and art and all that because we know that the queer community is so creative. We want to tap into that creativity. And we believe that art and music and books is a great way to inspire young people and equip them and to ultimately change the narrative in society at large, to change the narrative that being queer is incompatible with faith.
You guys have an incredible volunteer base. You people who want to get involved. I noticed Beloved Arise says Beloved Arise youth pastor network.
Yes.
Was the original diagram for this, and maybe the continuing diagram for it in your mind, that this would be a network of youth pastors, youth counselors around the country who would be, I'm thinking sans COVID-19, who would be meeting with these kids? Or was this always intended to be a cyber community that's online? Because I know right now Scott's meeting on Monday night with 6 or 7 dozen kids from all around the world. And I don't ever want to say COVID-19 was fortuitous, but while I don't think God does these kinds of things, in a world where things like COVID-19 happens, you and I both know God is so utilitarian and economic that Paul was right. All things somehow work
Work
together
together.
for good. Talk a little bit about COVID-19, what Scott's doing on Monday, and how your mind has shifted from just being a local Seattle ministry in the beginning to something far more universal.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those God, like divine interventions, right? And so from the beginning, actually, since February, our plan has been to be digital. And so even before COVID, our plan was to be digital. The reason for that is because we knew that the young people that we were trying to reach were spread across the land. And in many cases, the only way we could reach them, because if they're trapped, in these four walls of churches that are kind of, oppressing them, the only way we could really reach them is to hang out in the spaces where kids go. And for now, it's social media, and more so now with COVID, right? And so we always planned to be a digital ministry. And so when COVID hit, it kind of just gave us um, an opportunity to double down on what that meant. And it created a world that was open to and accepted digital means of gathering, right? And so doing the youth group, we started it off here in Seattle, thinking that it could complement, sort of our digital ministry. But we quickly realized after COVID that this is something that could be accessible to anyone as long as you have an internet connection, right? So moving forward, we will continue to double down on um, uh, digital ministry. Again, I believe that is the way that we're going to be able to scale and reach young people across the world. The reality is, for every young person that reaches out to us, and we have, you know, kids reaching out to us every week. For every young person that has the courage to reach out and say, I want to be part of this community, we know that there are 500, 600, 700, 1,000 other kids who aren't reaching out, but are paying attention to our feed, to our social media, to the work that we're doing on digital. And we want to minister to them as well. Even though we don't know their names, we don't see their faces, we want to be a source of hope and encouragement for them until they feel it's safe and right for them to reach out to us. And so we're always mindful of those invisible kids, and we speak to them also. For every time that we tell a story of a young person that is out and is bold about their faith, we also acknowledge those for whom it is not safe to be out. So yeah, that's part of the reason why we digital.
Practically speaking, if one of the families at Everybody Church, and we have hundreds of families at Everybody Church who have entered into this domain because one of their children came out to them. And again, what we often hear lamented is that while Everybody Church provides as much support as it can, why the David Gushies and Robert Brownsons and Matthew Vines provide the abstract material, the theological material, theoretical material for us to study. In terms of just a youth pastor on the ground in my kid's life, what can Beloved Arise do for that family in Newfoundland or Reykjavik? We have families in New Guinea and South Louisiana. They have a 16-year-old kid, and that child feels detached, has been in a youth group its entire life, but doesn't get to go to that youth group now. How do they reach out to Beloved Arise, and what can Beloved Arise do for that family specifically?
Yeah, so we're so new that we're trying to figure out sort of our capacity. And every week I meet with Scott and say, okay, are we full yet? Are we full yet? And so far we're not full yet. So how do you reach out? You go to belovedarise.org. If you're a parent who's concerned about your kid, reach out, belovedarise.org. And there you'll learn more about the youth group. You'll get access to our free resources, that these guides to affirming theology that's written for teens, Bible studies, things like that. And you'll also find stories there of young and older people who are sharing their testimonies of the goodness that they have in God's goodness in their life as queer people. I have to tell you, it's so delightful when parents reach out to us. Kids reach out to us all the time, and that's delightful too. But when parents reach out to us and say, I worry about my child. I worry about them. I fully affirm them, but they just seem really lonely. And so, is this something that, can I meet with you to talk about this? And is this something where we can get my child connected? And we're delighted when that happens. We're happy to meet with parents and talk through that with them. And parents are also welcome to join these gatherings as well if they want to check it out and see what happens there. It's nothing fancy. It's just a place for kids to hang out and to worship together and to hear a message and then break out into small groups. And the reason why we're able to scale this with only one staff member is that we have dozens of volunteers, kind-hearted individuals who give of their time. These are adult volunteers, many of whom are members of the queer community, of the LGBTQ community, and they give of their time to be leaders, small group leaders and facilitators. Um, and that's really where the magic happens, Dan, right? I mean, when you go to this Zoom, there's so many people, like 70, 80 people on the Zoom, it can feel overwhelming. But then after worship, after the message, we break out into small groups of 6, 7, 8 people with a facilitator, with a small group leader, a volunteer. And that's where the magic happens, because that's where kids can go deeper, where they can share prayer requests, where they can talk through what they just heard and kind of grapple with that. It's truly, in some ways, it's magical, but in another way, it's just church. It's the promise of Jesus, right? That wherever two or three are gathered, um, there he is, right? And so we're gathered. We happen to be gathered digitally, but we're still gathered. We're still two or three gathered, and so I think that's what makes it so magical, isn't it?
Well, you know as well as I do, our kids are gathering digitally anyway. I mean, our kids, that's their social life now seems to be digital. And again, we could complain about that and we could talk about the deficits of that, but I suppose every generation has that bit of reticence about the way the next generation is engaging and doing the
Yeah.
things that they do.
And
But
they're forming deep relationships. I
I
think
was
as
one that
adults we think like, oh, how
I
can they
know.
really be friends? But they really are forming real deep friendships in a way that sometimes old folks like us just don't understand.
I know that's true because I was one of those, and a lot of time we do this because of fear and insecurity, but I was poo-pooing, social media and all of that. And then I have found the most gratifying years and time of my ministry, the work that I feel like I've been prepared my entire life to do through an incredibly intimate process that I have found through social media, specifically Facebook, where a lot of 40 to 70-year-old people are who are the people that I'm directly trying to reach, the parents of these kids. And I did not know that the level of intimacy that I've experienced there could happen across this medium, but it is, and it's happening remarkably. There are so many hundreds, if not thousands, of people that I now feel intimately acquainted with through the sharing of story that when we finally meet in person, I don't know that much will change. I will be glad to finally hug their neck on the other side of COVID and, not through a screen. But yes, intimacy and Christian fellowship, spiritual nurturing can happen in this medium, and you guys are doing it. I think one of the things that I also love is you're not just providing a place for the kids, but as this movement is burgeoning and growing, there are a lot of youth pastors, a lot of ministers, a lot of people who have hearts for kids that they've been thinking this for a long time. They're in the position that Scott's in, and they still want to minister. So you guys talk a little bit about the way you use volunteers. I'm sure you vet those volunteers because they're working with kids. If there are youth pastors out there that don't feel like they can do the fullness of what their heart, intends in the setting where they are, or they've even had to leave the church, how can they get involved with Beloved Arise?
Yes, we do have a vetting process for all of our volunteers who work directly with youth. As you can imagine, this is, our top priority is the safety of our kids. And so yeah, we do that. We have youth pastors and even like recent seminary grads who reach out to us and say, "How can I help? Like, how can you use my hands? How can you use my heart?" We meet with those folks and we plug them in at various parts of the ministry, whether it's in writing or in working with youth, through small groups, um, or other things. The youth pastor network that you mentioned, let's talk about that a little bit. So at the very beginning, we knew that there are other youth pastors out there who work with young people who are struggling, right? They could be part of an affirming church, but don't really know how to kind of shape youth programming so that it is aware of the experiences of youth, of queer youth. Or you have youth pastors who are themselves affirming but are part of a church that's not. And so how do you manage that? How you walk through that? And so part of Scott's job as our digital youth pastor is to create community amongst other youth pastors, and for him to learn from others and for others to learn from each other. We want to create a community and network of youth pastors who are doing this kind of work. And to the extent that Beloved Arise can be a source of encouragement, a source of information, a resource for kind of best practices, we'd be delighted for that.
I also wanted to highlight the fact that you are a new organization. You have your 501c3. I think you're an organization that deserves our support and financial support. So if people in Everybody Church, we have a very generous group of people, if they wanted to help you guys financially, how would they do that? Have you made that process easy for them? Are you passing an offering plate?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that up, Stan. That's really very kind of you. Yeah, this ministry has no cost to young people. We don't believe in charging people to be part of the youth group. We don't charge for our publications. Um, Everything that we create and we deliver is free of charge because we know that young people don't have those kinds of resources, right? Especially those who live in homes where even looking up things like Beloved Arise, they have to do in secret, right? And we have some kids who join us from a closet. That's kind of ironic, but because they're afraid of who might find out that they're joining this youth group. If your heart has been stirred today, and this is something that you want to support, if you want to support queer youth of faith across the country, um, then I would encourage you to just get to know Beloved Arise, like visit belovedarise.org. And if you do feel led to support us financially, we've made it very easy on that website. There's a donate button right up top that explains where your money would go. 100% of your donations are tax deductible, and there's even a way to give through the website with a credit card or PayPal, or if you choose to write a check, that's okay too. For those of you, by the way, who work in corporations where there's matching, we are also plugged in that way, and so we can. There's information on the website about that as well.
So, June, I was thinking, I think this way about the ministry that God has placed in my hands for stewardship. I was thinking, as you dream and are looking forward 3 years, 5 years from now, what would be the ideal? And I love even asking that question when I think about Ephesians 3:20, where Paul said, now unto him who is able to do exceeding and abundantly above all we could ask or think. I think the beauty of the work that we do, we can't even think big enough to match the heart of God on this. But as you do try to stretch your mind and your heart, where do you want Beloved Arise to be 5 years from now? What's it going to be doing?
So my big vision, kind of big bold vision, is that together, with you, all of you who are watching together, that we will create the kind of world that our young people deserve to live in, the kind of world where it feels safe to come out, where it feels safe to embrace who you are, and it feels safe to be both an LGBTQ person and a person of faith. So that is our big vision. Like we want to see that in 5 years, we want to see those suicide numbers go down. We want to see those depression numbers go down. We want to see the rates of homelessness go down. That's the work that we're in. That's the commitment that we have, is to create a safer place for queer youth to grow up in. The steps that it'll take to get there um, are the kinds of things that we're doing now. We want to make sure that there is no young person out there that believes that they have to make a choice between who they are and what they believe, right? We want to make sure that that this message of love, beloved, arise, that this message of love is spread far and wide, so that people just know that this organization exists, that it's okay for me to be um, to be queer and to be a Christian, right? And so if there's even one young person out there who chooses life over death, then this will all have been worth it, right? We don't want to see any young person give up on their life, give up on their faith because someone else told them that that's what the Bible says. That's unacceptable. And so if Beloved Arise can participate in even one young person understanding the truth about the gospel of Jesus Christ and their place in that gospel, then that is, that's our little dream that points us towards the bigger dream.
Just last week at Everybody Church, I used as a text 2 Corinthians 1, where the Apostle Paul said, if I was afflicted, if I've suffered, if I've gone through anything, it was for your sake. He was talking to the church. And his logic for that was, he said, because when I've been greatly afflicted, or I have suffered, or I have faced a need, that has driven me to God. And every time I've been driven to God out of need, God has poured comfort into me. And I love this statement. Paul said, now I comfort others with the comfort
Comfort.
wherewith God has
That's
comforted
right.
me.
Yes.
And I even mentioned a quote from one of my favorite authors, Frederick Buechner, who uses the phrase stewards of pain. We talk about stewardship in terms of money and time and talent, but so often we miss the fact that sometimes it's, to use the words of Paul in Colossians, it's where we fill in our bodies and our psyche, the sufferings of Jesus, which were incomplete, where we meet God and humans in suffering, and we sit on that common bench. I know your story. I say all of that to say, I know your story is ultimately the impetus to be able to share not only the suffering that you went through as a child and as a young man, but to share the comfort that God has poured on, to be able to share that. It's really a remarkable gift, this work that you and I get to be a part of. And so I know your story has a lot to do with this. I would love for you just to leave us with a word of exhortation and your heart. And I just want to say, June Love Young, on behalf of everybody church, before you share that, we love you, we value you, we need you, and we really want there to be a seamless exchange between what we do as a cyber church at Everybody Church and what you're doing at Beloved Arise, and until finally you go far enough east, you get west, and you go far enough west, and you get east, and we're just a part of one another, a functioning part of the body. So to that end, thank you. I'm excited about what you offer to us, and we hope to offer a gift to you as well. So would you leave us with a final word about Beloved Arise, your own story, your
Yes.
testimony? Bless us,
Sure.
please.
Yeah. So I think I'll end with the name of this organization, Beloved Arise, which comes from the Songs of Songs 210, which reads, Beloved, arise, my beautiful one, come with me. And so I think often we forget that God is in love with us. God calls us my darling, my beautiful one, my beloved. And so I just leave you with that, to know today that you are so loved by the maker of the universe who made you. And so I leave you with that. I leave you with this. Beloved, arise.
Thank you, Jim. On behalf of everybody, church, we love what you're doing,
Thank you.
and I'm very excited about what the months and years to come have to hold. I think God has the divine hand in the midst of all of this. So, everybody, church, we love you, and as I always say, there's enough pain in the world. Let us be good to one another. In Christ's name, we love you, and we'll see you again soon. God bless.